leadership is going to be a skill of that continuous learning that, when I step into the next roles, it's something that I'll have to work on. It's not, you can't just focus on being good at your job.
Yeah.
Leadership in and of itself is a skill you have to cultivate.
I think everybody is a leader, no matter if you have the title or not the title, because that is how you work together in today's world. So how do you know if you are a good leader?
I think if people come to you with problems, even if you don't carry you're not their boss or their direct report, it's definitely one of those ways where it's like, hey, I'm seen as somebody who is a good sounding board. People are more focused on making a positive impact than they are hoarding some sort of competitive advantage. So I really like that about the industry.
So how has that changed the way you communicate?
More frequently is definitely key. More frequent communication, clearer communication, and I think ultimately there's a scene in Ted Lasso where he's throwing darts at a bar. I don't know if you've watched this show,
I love it.
So it's when he's fighting Rebecca's ex-husband for kind of respect, right? Keeping him out of the box suite so that she can, have her peace and be a fan in peace. He's throwing the darts and he's talking about, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's huge when collaborating, whether it's internal, external, whoever, whether you're co-opetition.
Yeah. You're listening to Leadership Manufacturing Podcast. I'm your host, Sannah Vinding, and I'm a strategic leader with over 20 years of experience in B2B marketing, product development, and team empowerment. I'm passionate about sharing insights, I hope you can see it, and tools to help professionals enhance their leadership skills. In each episode, we discuss relevant topics for leaders like you, and we're offering practical strategies and valuable insights. All this is to help you refine your leadership style and drive success in your role. I interview professionals within the manufacturing industry and the distribution sector, and they all share their knowledge around leadership. Be sure to follow us, like and subscribe, and check out our YouTube channel, and make sure to check the website. It's leadershipinmanufacturing.com. In today's episode, I'm joined by Ben Hamilton. He's the marketing manager at NorComp, and that's a leading manufacturer of ruggedized, high-reliability interconnect solutions for demanding environments across industrial, medical, military, and robotics markets. And in this episode, we explore what it means to lead without a title, how active listening and emotional intelligence are shaping effective leadership, and how collaboration across teams and companies can drive lasting growth. So, it's an episode packed with a lot of practical insight. You don't want to miss it, so enjoy this episode. Welcome to the show, Ben. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm always asking this question in the start because I want to see the passions of everybody about the industry. So what excites you about the electronics industry?
I came into the industry at a really interesting time, 4 years ago, coming on 5 years, COVID was in full swing. Everybody, all the inventory was off the shelf. People were kind of realizing just how sustainable or scalable their business was. So I came on board and, paying a lot of attention to getting all of the foundational building blocks in place. But I definitely think my favorite part of the industry is the leaders. A lot of people you've had on your show, I've had the chance to work with, meetings with them. And I love how not jealous people are of their experience and their wisdom. There's very much, people are more focused on making a positive impact than they are hoarding some sort of competitive advantage. So I really like that about the industry.
That's nice. That's a really good view on it. I will agree with that because everybody's supporting each other, right? And it's also it's a big industry and also a small industry.
It is, yeah, and I mean that, be it a distributor that we work with or a manufacturer, even a competitive manufacturer. There's just there's an environment of camaraderie that I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's nice. So now almost at 5 years, right? How has your leadership style, or just because I think everybody is a leader, so how has your leadership style changed over the years?
About 2 years ago, the gentleman leading our business unit implemented a weekly meeting, and he had us read through 1 Minute Manager and read through 7 Habits and a couple other pieces of leadership literature.
Yeah.
And it really started forming, this idea in my head that leadership really isn't a reward for doing your last job good. Leadership being a skill that you either have or you don't, and that you cultivate over time.
Yeah.
There's definitely businesses where people, being a really good business development manager ultimately lead you to being a sales director, and the
Yeah.
transition doesn't always translate. It's like a offensive coordinator in the NFL. They get promoted to the head coach. They get a little bit of leash, and then it doesn't really work out. And like the idea that leadership is going to be a skill of that continuous learning, that when I step into the next roles, it's something that I'll have to work on. It's not, you can't just focus on being good at your job.
Yeah.
Leadership in and of itself is a skill you have to cultivate.
Yeah, I like that. So if you look now and saying, okay, this is the skill you have worked on or expanded on, or now you're like really great at, what kind of skills have you put in your, your hat or your back?
It's the things that I can use at home are often the things that I develop best for work. I was getting, when I came on board, I was a few months married, and then we had a kid not too long after that, and it was the seeking first to understand and then to be understood, that active listening, and then the perspective switching, like genuinely being able to understand where somebody else is coming from and stop thinking about what you're going to say next and listen to understand.
Yeah.
That comes out of the leadership books, but I mean, it impacts my own personal life as much, if not more, than in my professional, and that kind of leadership skill that I'm still developing.
Yeah, I like that. I think the whole listening part, also just like breathe, right? Taking that little pause before you just interrupt. And I know I'm bad sometimes. I've interrupted, right?
I'm one of eight siblings.
Oh,
So if you don't interrupt, you don't get a word in edgewise. So it's been an intentional skill, not a natural one. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Oh, 8 kids. Wow. That's a huge number. Kudos to your mom. No.
Amazing woman.
Yeah. Cool. But so I want to learn more about the meetings that you have. So what's been the big learning point or the takeaways that you're like saying, oh, this is why we have these meetings?
Um, it's funny because sometimes in the moment there's a little bit of tongue in cheek. You kind of laugh. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read The 1 Minute Manager. It's a tiny little book, and throughout it, it's a narrative style, and they keep saying, "What a guy, what a guy." And it's kind
Yeah.
of a tongue in cheek. Everybody's kind of making fun of the book as we read through it, but you come, 6 months down the road, and people are dealing with actual issues, actual conflicts,
Yeah.
but we're referencing the culture that we were instilling. And that's where it's kind of like you laugh about it a little bit, but then you really see the dividends pay, months and months later, where
Yeah.
people are catching themselves, the blameless problem solving is actually being put into effect and really working. Whereas, where you're installing it, it doesn't seem like there's buy-in, and then you see it over time kind of
Yeah.
growing at.
How,
And that's from the meetings. That's definitely something that it took months, but now you get to see the
the
benefits.
benefits of it. How about like building the personal, but also, of course, the whole work, right? Your professional working relationship. So having these meetings, does that help breaking down that you are trusting each other more, so you can be vulnerable? Or
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
how is it
that's
going?
I think one of the concepts is those emotional deposits, right? Like the spending time, and we were encouraged even to bring personal examples into those meetings. It wasn't all about like who on your team, go out. If there was like not a homework assignment, but if there was a specific topic covered, it
Yeah.
would be, hey, when we come back in 2 weeks, let's talk through an instance where you like this clicked. You saw
Yeah.
you had an opportunity to make an emotional deposit, or you had an opportunity to be actively listening instead of listening to respond. And honestly, more often than not, it would be personal. And when you're telling those stories and you're having those interactions, it creates a very tight knit team. I definitely think we've got a close team here.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. So if you're going further, right? Because that's when you're going to that meeting room. That's where you build your trust and the
Mm.
relationship. But then when you look out functional, right? Because you have sister companies you work together with.
Yep.
How do you then build this trust? How do you take what you've learned and then share it?
Yeah, I think I borrowed the term co-opetition. I don't remember where I first got that. I think I picked it up at an ERA breakout session.
Yeah.
But when you shifting from that co-opetition to that win-win full cooperation, at first seemed like it was going to be difficult, but ultimately you really started to see how much there wasn't competition and how much there was room for synergy, how little overlap. For every dozen opportunities where maybe we both went after the same opportunity with different, solutions,
Yeah.
there were hundreds and hundreds of opportunities where we could bring more solutions to customers,
Yeah.
where, we're not competing, we are working together and really creating that win-win. And I think clear, consistent communication has just been so key
Yeah.
to making it really a well-oiled machine, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. So any examples you can share on how to do this collaboration, right? As with sister companies. Is it like on a campaign? Is it when you educate your sales team or your sales force,
It's a lot of it is transparency, right? It's opening up past, present, future, your systems, your communications. There's the IT side of things, getting all your stacks to communicate, but then it's getting your salespeople in the same room. I think that there was such a breakthrough point for us. We had a sales summit where we got everybody from the sales and marketing teams into the same room,
Yeah.
and that's where like I started lighting up ideas, the opportunities for bringing a better customer experience by taking the best. I think I mentioned coming into this industry at such an interesting time where people were realizing we don't have scale
Yeah.
or the sustainability piece. Everybody, you did 3 years sales in 1 year, and all of a sudden everybody's like, okay, how do we stay ahead of what happened during COVID? And so we spent 2 years on operational excellence and laying that foundation.
Yeah.
And I don't think if we hadn't done that, we probably wouldn't have been in the position we were to know, hey, here's our strengths and here's our weaknesses. And then look at our sister companies as we come together and say, here's where our strengths are perfect for your weaknesses and vice versa, where we can come together and really just see. Again, it's been a very interesting experiment because so many of our strengths and weaknesses didn't overlap. Similarly with the customer experience, right?
Yeah.
We're able to create such a better cohesive unit, especially on the customer facing, the sales and marketing side of things. It's been an interesting experience, especially coming from the first status of this co-opetition, not sure, and then just seeing things really fall into place and click.
Yeah. I like that. That's a really good description on how, get everybody on that same page, right? Or even in that same room, because I'm sure a lot of with sales, right? They are remote, or they're traveling a lot. So bringing everyone together, and as well also with marketing, right? You get so much more drive or energy when you actually are in the same room. So
Yep.
that's kudos to you guys for doing that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have another question, but for me it's almost similar at times to, especially with my role. I was a sole proprietor, right? I ran the marketing unit for our respective company, and coming into a place of collaboration, and that you go from that tiered leadership, right, and
Yeah.
full ownership to the distributed leadership, distributed. It's similar, when you bring a partner into your life where it's like, hey, I no longer my decisions affect other people. I need to talk to them and benefit from their wisdom and experience, but also, you know, slowing it down and acknowledging that your decisions affect other people and theirs affect yours, and they have a good perspective to step into and understand.
Yeah. So how has that changed the way you communicate?
More frequently is definitely key. More
Yeah.
frequent communication, clearer communication, and I think ultimately, there's a scene in Ted Lasso where he's throwing darts at a bar. I don't know if you've watched this show,
I
but
have. I love it.
so it's when he's fighting Rebecca's ex-husband for kind of respect, right? Keeping him out of the box suite so that she can, have her peace and be a fan in peace. He's throwing the darts and he's talking about, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's huge
Yeah.
when collaborating, whether it's internal, external, whoever, or whether you're in a co-opetition,
Yeah.
that be curious, not judgmental. Assume that somebody's role entails more than you understand, Some of the experiences that I've had in terms of leadership without the title are having somebody's interacting with a rep or a BDM, and they don't necessarily see all of the things that they do for their role. They only see where they interact with them. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
here's why they need to be kept in the loop on the email chain, because ultimately they need to seem like a cohesive part of the unit.
Yeah.
And that, just be curious, not judgmental, ask questions, learn more about what somebody's role entails, what their day to day, and not assume that their job's easier than it is.
No, 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 no. There's so much more layers to everything, right? I'm sure with your role as well, not everybody understand every level. And you also have to make that visible, right? To say, hey, when we create ABC, right, there's so much behind it, and this is where
Yeah.
it comes from. I'm just pausing the episode for a few seconds. I want to make sure you know we have a newsletter. Go to leadershipmanufacturing.com, sign up for the newsletter. Then you're in the loop when we have new episodes or we have new leadership skills that we want to share and you should learn. So be sure to check it out. Back to the show. Awesome. Okay, I want to find out how you learn. What's the best? How do you get inspired and how do you learn?
I think that it's someone with an experience is never at the mercy of somebody with an argument, right? That experiential learning, if you see a problem, jumping in, helping out, that is, you're never going to learn better than experiences. If a textbook answer, I'm an auditory learner. I've learned, like, books are always playing in my ear, books, podcasts.
Yeah.
That helps you lay a foundation, and then ultimately just exposing yourself to more experiences, more aspects of the business. There might be something. There's a lot of opportunities to excuse yourself from a room because the conversation doesn't directly pertain to you.
Yeah.
But even those leadership meetings that I was mentioning, like, I'm hearing people talk through problem solving in operational areas of the business that I don't otherwise have any insight into.
Yeah.
And on rare occasions, there's an opportunity to even bring something to the table. But for the most part, you just get a greater appreciation for the whole picture.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, I think, that exposing yourself to as much of the business, to as many factions and job functions is huge for my own learning, definitely.
Yeah. I think it's good. It's also good to be, as you just said, right, to get exposed in different ways.
Yeah.
Because even if you hear it once, right, you're like, oh, maybe you puzzle about it and saying, oh, okay, let me just make a note about that topic or whatever discussion it is, right? And then if it comes back or you hear it from other teams, I'm sure suddenly, connecting some of the dots to say, hey, right, this is actually bigger than I thought, or maybe you can actually use it for anything on the marketing side as well. So
Something that's been huge that helped me a ton in the marketing side is, and going back to the question of how do you learn, is I took over for a little while. It's not necessarily a marketing function, but we have a live support chat, right?
yeah,
And I facilitated that for about a year, where customers would ask questions, or a rep or a
yeah,
distribution salesperson would come in and ask a question. And I would then go to the head of engineering, or even dig through product tables or data sheets myself.
yeah,
And even though I didn't have the knowledge to make it the quickest answer, I was a conduit. And being that conduit of information really accelerated, like, my product knowledge, which in turn just makes it's a lot easier to market a product that you understand.
yeah, yeah. I love this. I really love it because it also helps you, right, to problem solving, right? So if you
Yeah.
have anything else, you're like, oh, he's or she is the expert, right? That's where I go, or this is where I go and find the information that we have internal. Maybe not
Yeah.
everything is shown to the customer on a website or maybe on a
And
portal.
find the consistent gaps in the customer experience. Like, if a
Yeah,
customer is consistently asking for
yeah,
something,
yeah,
like, hey, we actually have buried this web page with all these answers about this specific, like, you want to know about the torque on the mating force, like,
yeah,
how much torque can you have for automated assembly? Like, hey, we've got this information, but in the last month, a dozen people have asked, we need to put it on more
yeah,
places, like improving the customer experience. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, most of those engineers don't want to be on the chat. They want to find the answer themselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
When they're asking, right? They have They have looked.
They're already frustrated. Yeah, yeah.
They're
That's
always
it.
frustrated.
You want to go above and beyond
Yeah.
and help them
Oh,
and
well,
not
that's
having it
that's
like, oh,
good.
you could have found this yourself. None of that
Yeah.
attitude
Yeah.
whatsoever.
No, and I think it's also like the ease of doing business, right? Because even though you have the information, but if it's like 5 clicks into the website, and maybe you know it because you've been part of building the website, or anybody else, at NorComp knows how to find it because it's like your back pocket. But if somebody else is coming and you just want to have it either in 1 or 2 clicks, that's an important data point, right? That you can say, hey, we can actually enhance how we communicate to the engineers so they can find everything much easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to go back to, because you talked about being independently, right? And now you're working with the sister companies. So how the transition, can you tell me more about what it was like? Because I want to learn more about, the easy part, but also maybe a little bit of the tough part about it.
Yeah, I think, even within the team, there's a common joke. I've seen a couple stand-up comedians do it where it's like only one person in the relationship is allowed to be having like a crisis at a time, right? And so, different aspects of the business, as you bring systems together, as
Yeah.
different verticals, engineering, sales, inside sales, marketing, as each of them go through their own respective process, being there for your teammates,
Yeah.
when they're having a more tough day, when their workload is increased more, um, being there, listening, perspective switching, offering up just a listening ear. Because then when it comes your time to have, hey, like, I'm not sure how this is going to work going forward. I'm used to having this ownership and now it's shared and all that. If you're having a tough day, there's people knocking on the door, checking in, saying, how are you doing? And that's,
Yeah.
it's a two-way street where I think that the emotional deposits really began to pay off as you're there for your teammates, and then they come and are there
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and really the two-way street is so important, right? That you have that because and that's also going back to all the trust, right, in that business relationship. It makes things easier. It sounds easy, it's not easy. It could be like a roller coaster, right? But knowing that somebody's actually there, also like protecting your back, right? Is
Bringing the optimism.
Yeah,
My wife is currently 9 months pregnant, and one of the conversations we have is pain with a purpose, right? It may be there might be growing pains, but if there's something, if on the other side you're working towards something that is going to be better for everybody, and you can bring that optimism and remind yourself and other people at
yeah,
the right moments that, hey, we're not going through change for no reason at all. We're going through change to ultimately set up a better platform for future success.
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's all about that transparency, right? And then having everybody at the table, of course,
Yep.
I'm sure in different groups, but still, everybody, you need to listen to everyone and have that transparency, so everybody
Don't
understands.
tell my wife that I compared a restructure to a child growing.
Oh yeah, no, I
Uh,
won't. She
no,
won't
no
listen.
need to include any of that.
Don't worry. Another one here. I still want to talk about the leadership. So I think everybody is a leader, no matter if you have the title or not a title, because that is how you work together in today's world. So how do you know if you are a good leader?
I think if people come to you with problems, even if you don't carry you're not um, their boss or their direct report, is definitely one of those ways where it's like, hey, I'm seen as somebody who is a good sounding board. Um, I talked about it earlier. Leadership being a skill, not a title, is definitely something that I've learned over the last 4 years, and I've grown
Yeah,
in. And I think the other way you like know if you have that gene in you is the taking ownership and the blameless problem solving. Right? It's the not my area of control, not my problem is a really cancerous idea. And just staying away from that, like, hey, there's a problem down the hallway, but it's not my area of influence. Let me stay out of it. But rather offering, you know, at first an ear, listening
yeah,
to the problem, and then
yeah,
perspective if it's warranted. If somebody is struggling to understand an aspect of the business that you do interact with more,
Yeah.
you can definitely come in and offer like, hey, it might seem like so and so is ignoring you right now, but actually, here's what they were here's what leadership has them working on right now, and just
Yeah.
offer that perspective. Actually, this person's really busy with this important piece of work. You're not being ignored.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important. And just having to start with that listening, right? That's the
Yeah.
important, because again, you and you can take that to your home as well, right? To your spouse. But sometimes you only hear it from one side, or you think about it from one side, but you need to hear it from everyone, right? So you can actually get up to that higher level and understand what the problem is and how to solve
Yeah,
it.
I think again it comes back to that optimism. I
Yeah.
think there's the studies about what one bad apple on a team does versus one overachiever, and the bad apple brings people down way more effectively
Yeah.
than one high achiever brings the status quo up.
Yeah.
So it's avoiding that negativity, not being if there's feedback to be given, give it in the right method to the right
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
But just bringing a level of optimism to the
Yeah.
team is another way in which you can lead without a title.
Yeah. And I think another way as well, right? If you give kudos to anybody you work together with, right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, that was really awesome, right? Being that positive person. I always see if somebody gives me something, I'm like, oh, I got my energy for today, right? Or my vitamin pill.
This is
Just give me
catch
that
people doing
boost.
something right.
Yeah. It's just good.
Everybody's so good. Again, it goes back to the home life, right? It's so easy to catch somebody doing the one thing like, hey, you loaded the dishwasher wrong, or
Yeah.
hey, I noticed you didn't respond to the customer inside of our 2 hour window,
Yeah.
versus the, hey, that was a great, you went above and beyond. You went out and found resources that they hadn't even asked for, but that they
Yeah.
might need. Or, hey, I noticed, you folded and did the laundry today. Thank you. Even though that you do it every Tuesday for the last year, you still,
Yeah.
that gratitude and the catching somebody doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And I think you forget sometimes. You just get into the routine and like, oh yeah, right. That's just how it is. Or that's how everything's done. But it's so important to stop up and actually make that kind of comment, and actually tell somebody, right, I really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, looking for all of the thankless jobs that are done
Yeah.
in the workplace. There's lots of them. There's more than you see. There's more than you know. People
Yeah.
are performing thankless tasks that are essential to what you do for work.
Yeah. I've been better now if I'm calling anything, right? And it's like with customer service, nothing would work. Uh, and if I'm a little bit like when you talk, right, it's because you have a problem, right? And you need to talk to a person. And I'm like, okay, it's not their fault, right? This is their job. And I'm actually sometimes, oh my God, to sit there and have people being angry. Um, so I'm like always telling myself, I'm like, be positive, saying, this is the issue I have. Can you help me? And when they help me, I'm like always saying, you're a rock star. You made my day
Yeah.
at the end. And they get so happy because they're like, thank you, right?
Not used
They
to it.
did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If they're, of course, they help me. And still, but I still have to remind me because you have to be kind.
Yeah.
And if you're not kind, you're not going anywhere. So
You don't know what kind of day that person had yesterday or at
yeah,
home or anything like that. You never know what somebody's going through. That perspective switching, assuming that somebody means the best.
yeah, definitely. So one more question here. So if somebody new, right? We have new talent coming in.
Yeah.
You have like a lot of almost 5 years of great experience. I'm like, I love everything you say here. So if there was like a new talent coming into the industry, what kind of advice would you give this person?
I tell them to stick around. I think it's a great industry, a great future. A lot of the senior leadership is very welcoming and open with their experience. There's a lot of great programs. There's some where I didn't necessarily know. There's you got Spark, you've got all sorts of assets and abilities, but also gain that mentorship. Have a few people that you talk to that don't work for your company, right? I think that what we work with an agency that's specific to the industry. And
Yeah,
one of the things I tell them all the time is like, I've only ever worked for the EDAC group of companies for NorComp in this industry. So there's so much stuff that even though I work with distribution reps, I don't know what I don't know. So I think finding as many opportunities to expose yourself
yeah,
outside of your role, outside of your company, to
yeah,
learn, just to develop a picture of knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, I like that. I think the whole networking is can give so much, right? Even if you're saying it's a mentor or you're a mentee,
Yeah.
and maybe you don't have that kind of term when you actually are in the network or you're calling somebody to say, "Hey, can I pick your brain? I have this challenge." I just love that everybody in the industry lean in and saying yes. So, so back
Yeah.
to anybody new coming in, right? Don't be afraid. Ask for that network or ask to say, "Hey, who can I hang out with?" If it's just for 15 minutes on a Teams call or a Zoom call, right? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the mentorship I've received, nobody has the title. Like I don't. There's a lot of people who have mentored me that don't call me a mentee.
Yeah,
Be that somebody with 15 years of experience or two. That kind of distributed mentorship is
yeah,
definitely a big part of my role and
yeah.
experience in the industry.
Yeah, and I think also by having the conversation, if it's like mentorship or not mentoringship, if it's just networking or that conversation, it is a two-way, right? So anybody with a little bit of experience or many years of experience,
Yeah.
there's so much to learn from both sides. And also just with the industry, right? Because as you just said, what happened in over the last 5 years, everything has changed so much. So you can't just sit and saying, "Oh yeah, for 20 years ago, right? This is what we did. Let's do
Yeah,
that."
I had an experience at the ERA conference where I was talking to a gentleman, 30-year industry vet,
Yeah,
well known. And towards the end of the conversation, he was showing me something that they were doing on the market. And he was like asking me for feedback, and it's almost weird to have that two-way street where it's like,
yeah,
I guess you care what I think about this, and
yeah,
I appreciate that, and vice versa. Like, hey, what do you think about this? This is something that I've been meaning to bring to my, ownership of our company, and like, hey, here's an
yeah,
initiative, and just having the confidence, it instills confidence in somebody to kind of
yeah.
ask for feedback.
For feedback, right? Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
Okay, last question, Ben.
Yeah.
If you want to, I want you to go back in time, like a little bit back to the future here, right? No. What kind of advice, and I want to go further than the 5 years. So, what kind of
Okay.
advice would you give yourself if you were like looking back like 10 years?
I think 10 years ago, I would have liked to have known how much being proactive was worth. And
Yeah,
how much more learning on the job and being proactive and not being afraid to fail. I think that especially when you first enter the workforce, there's a more conservative approach, do what you're told. Whereas taking that ownership, going above and beyond, being proactive, not being afraid to start initiatives, bring ideas to the table, and I think it's the fear of rejection. I think you start with such a hefty. I never had a sales role. I was only ever in marketing, so I never picked up the phone and got told no over and over. And I think that if I was talking to myself 10 years ago, I might tell myself to pick up a job doing cold calls for about a year
Oh,
and learn to get over that fear of
yeah,
rejection, so that you can bring ideas to the table and understand that being proactive alone is such a skill set in and of itself.
yeah. I love that. I love that. And also, I think just what you're saying, right? The whole being that positive and look at different solutions.
Yeah,
And back to, even though you're saying didn't have a sales role, but what you mentioned with what you've done in your current position, right? A
yeah,
few years ago, where you were sitting actually answering when somebody was reaching out to the company and saying, where do I find this? Or help me with that. That is putting you out on an territory that maybe you were not too stable in, but
yeah.
but you figure it out and now you're stable in it. So it's a little bit the same of you saying that cold calling, being in unsecure, and how do you handle it, right? So I think you've
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah. No, I began doing something about 2 years ago where I make sure I go on a couple customer calls a year. I go
Yeah,
out with the BDMs, the reps, and I go on those customer calls. And even though my role is marketing, there's almost nothing that's more informative to my marketing strategy and what I'm doing than those customer visits.
yeah,
Experience the face-to-face, kind of interrogating the customer experience, I guess is the term for it. But if you never interact with the customer, you can find yourself just taking shots in the dark,
yeah,
seeing sticks versus really getting to know them and then tailoring it to real people. Everybody loves their personas and their data sets. and forgets that, there's real people on the other end of that email address.
I like that. Yeah, right. You want to talk to the real ones. No.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I really enjoyed this conversation today.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I love that you were here. I hope you learned a lot because I learn from every episode that I record. And as you can hear, I have a passion for this podcast. So as well, I want to make sure that you're staying in the loop. Check out leadershipmanufacturing.com. Sign up for the newsletter so you can stay in the loop when we have a new episode coming out. Something else that's important, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but most important, I think, is actually our YouTube channel, which is growing. So check it out. You can see the video podcast, but you can also see some of the shorts that's just a minute or less than a minute, and you can learn new leadership skills or get a new perspective about the industry. So check it out. It's called Leadership in Manufacturing. And remember, in the meantime, right, stay curious, keep learning.